Love God with your whole mind, soul, and heart, and love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus tells us that these two commandments, if kept, would fulfill the 613 commandments of the law that was given to Moses on Sinai, as well as the teachings of all the prophets. That should simplify things and make it easier, shouldn't it? But somehow it really doesn't. Admittedly, it is difficult for us as human beings to know how to love God, whom we don't fully understand and whose ways sometimes we find difficult to discern, and his will, when we can discern it, isn't always so easy for us to accept. At least to love him with that perfection that Jesus is asking, that intensity of love that is so wholehearted. It can be even more challenging at times to try to love our neighbor, especially when, by the broad definition of Jesus, neighbors include all fellow human beings, even those whom we may perceive to be quite different from ourselves due to their race or their culture, their place of origin, their religion, their ways of thinking, or their manner of living, and to love them just as we love ourselves and those who belong to us. Yet our fundamental problem is that we tend to find it difficult to understand love, at least as Jesus is teaching it. We can say that Jesus loves unconditionally because he accepted the cross and died in order to save us, even though we're sinners. Now, it is doubtful that Jesus likes us when we sin, especially when we are unjust or unaccepting, deliberately cold or cruel to others. Yet, Jesus still died to save us and wants only the best for us, and that best is God's kingdom. So when we think about that amazing truth, we should know we're glimpsing unconditional love. But that is what Jesus, in turn, asks of us as well. Not that we like everyone all the time, we just simply can't. Not that we approve of bad thinking or bad behavior, but even in spite of that, that we would want for others only what we want for ourselves, which is salvation. And if we have the opportunity to assist them in acquiring that, that we would even put ourselves out in order to help them do so. That is how we live, the kind of justice tempered by mercy that is an essential aspect of that unconditional love that Jesus shows us on the cross and asks us to imitate. Those who most especially need that sort of merciful love are identified for us explicitly in the first reading. They include those who come among us as strangers, aliens, people from other places seeking refuge and opportunity to survive and hopefully prosper, as well as people already living among us who are defenseless and as economically and socially helpless as were the widows and orphans in biblical times, which is nearly completely so, because in those days there were no economic or social safety nets whatsoever. Thus we can see how the law of love was so essential as Jesus taught it, because without charity and the discipline of almsgiving, it was nearly impossible for any friendless, poor, or helpless people to even survive in Jesus' day. This message is readily translated into situations with individuals and groups, even in our own day. People who are asking in, or people perpetually down and out. But the truth of our obligation to care for them is sometimes hard for us to hear and accept. Why? Because maybe instead of regarding the duty to welcome the stranger and care for the poor as mainly a moral and religious matter, these questions of who merits our acceptance or is worthy of our help tend to get politicized in our society, and so become unnecessary causes of controversy and division, even among us in the community of faith. So it's kind of unfortunate that these readings for the 30th Sunday in Ordinary Time are placed before us so close to a national election to make some mistakenly think that this homily would be encouraging people to vote for one party over another. Let's be absolutely clear. The scriptures placed before us today from 2,000 years ago and even earlier know absolutely nothing about contemporary political parties or their platforms. Rather, the aim in presenting them to us is to lead us to live not as better Democrats or Republicans, but in ways that would make us authentically Christian. And that should always be our first priority and our primary identity. We will do so by at least trying to love one another as Jesus loved us. That is, unconditionally. Let us appreciate the truth that such love is difficult because it doesn't come naturally to us. And so it requires an intentional effort on our part and a good dose of grace to inspire our ongoing change of mind and heart. Because only by constant conversion will we ever come to recognize others and see them as God sees them, and thus love them as Jesus himself is asking us to do. We can't excuse ourselves from this duty to cultivate Christian compassion for others by claiming that we're not really aware of anyone who's an alien or marginalized or terribly in need, because while they may not necessarily be living next door to us or standing right in front of us, still frequently they're seen on our television and computer screens. Thus, our awareness of them in this way makes them neighbor enough for us to at least care about their plight. And it compels us to offer assistance to improve their lot or bring them relief if it is in our power to do so. Challenging as it may be to try to love our neighbor as ourselves, especially those who seem to be different from us or constantly in difficulty, it is perhaps even more challenging to know how to love God, who remains invisible, and to do so with our whole heart, mind, and soul. Yet Jesus places this law of love before us as the law that summarizes all the rest, and so is to be obeyed above all else by his followers. As we do try that, let us readily remember that enduring gospel truth, that we can never even begin to claim that we love the God whom we cannot see, unless we are at least trying to love the neighbor